meat and curry, I'm your man. Cause how we all lose it is a mystery. It's like the changing of our wardrobes from a dire history. But it's the one making us not stop. 50 kilograms is all we've got to drop. La 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 la, la 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 la.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's 0% Drop podcast with me, Ian Wellman, and Sam James. Sam, hello.
Hello, people. How are we doing?
So, ladies and gents, we have a very special guest today who is going to talk to us around financial health, physical health, and various other kind of habits and addictions. But I'll let him do a much better job at introducing himself. Over to you, Barney.
So my name's Barney Whiter. I write a blog called The Escape Artist. I write about financial freedom. I write about financial wellness. I write about career change, and I write about health. When I'm sort of explaining how I got started, people ask me how I got started in it, and I kind of go back in time. So in this is going way back in 1981, I was 11, and my parents did the classic British thing of they bought the biggest house they could possibly buy, and to do that they borrowed as much money as they could possibly borrow from the bank. And unfortunately, that year interest rates went to 17%. And my dad worked in the construction industry. And so his work kind of dried up for a bit. It looked like he might lose his job. He actually clung on to it. But the mortgage rate went to 17%, and my parents were screwed. So that year, everything got cancelled. You know, my dad stopped buying beer, brewed his own, stopped buying a newspaper, couldn't go on holiday, blah 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 blah. So boohoo, poor me, poor us. It wasn't actually that big of a deal. It kind of worked out in the end. But that was a formative experience for me, and I took from that if you owe a lot of money to the bank and you can't pay the money to the bank, ultimately they can kick you out on the street. And so that kind of informed a lot of my decisions in life after that. So I kind of, when I went off to college, I did an economics degree. I then moved to London, trained as a chartered accountant, and then I went and worked in the city, went and worked in corporate finance and investment banking for 20 years. That damn near killed me. But at the end of those 20 years, I had kind of stashed away enough that I didn't need to do it anymore. So I could leave the city, leave the corporate world, basically focus a bit on my health, which I'd really, really let slide during that period, working a stressful job in corporate finance. So yeah, about 10 years ago, I quit. And since then, I've been writing and coaching people about, financial freedom, and health and career change.
Let's dive straight into the health, if you're okay with that. You mentioned it nearly killed you, that sort of stuff. What do you mean by that?
I mean, I wouldn't say it was a regular occurrence, but whilst I was working in the city, people would drop dead. So I remember, working with a female lawyer who just dropped dead one day. And it turned out she'd been an alcoholic, and she was, I think, 47 when she died. Someone I knew, someone I'd worked with. And so, alcoholism is quite a common coping strategy for people, for lawyers, doctors, and people holding down stressful jobs. I certainly used alcohol to blow off steam. It was my sort of reward mechanism. It was my de-stressing mechanism. It was my sort of escape mechanism. But I would never have said I was an alcoholic. I could go easily. I could go a week without drinking. I think once I even did a month without drinking. But, for me, I was definitely self-medicating at times. And so, the way I put it is that when I was working in corporate finance, I was going into health overdraft. So I was just spending a lot of time running on adrenaline. I was spending too much time like drinking too much, and I was kind of burning the candle at both ends, and slowly getting burnt out.
What about your physical weight at the time? Were you heavy? Were you like kind of where were you with that?
Well, the weight thing, I didn't have too much of a problem with that, because what I used to do, my mentality was like, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to play hard, I'm going to go to the pub and sort of party hard, and I'm going to burn it off with exercise. And you can get away with that for a while. And it kind of works if you're running on adrenaline the whole time and you're doing exercise. So I lived and worked in London. I lived in Battersea, worked in the city, and I would just cycle in and out of work every day. So I was kind of doing like 12 miles cycling every day. Sometimes I would run in and run back. So I was kind of hitting the exercise hard. And that plus living off adrenaline meant that I was never like really overweight. It was never obese, anything like that. I was more like, there's a term called skinny fat, which is like when you've got, you don't look overweight, but you've got quite a lot of visceral fat around the organs, and you've got poor body composition, and you lack muscle, and it's not great for your metabolic health. So people would say, oh, what's your problem? If I ever talked about my weight, people say, you don't have a weight problem. But I was unhealthy.
Resonate with quite a lot of this, hence the questions. But what made you decide to turn? Like, what was there like a rock bottom moment, or what was happening at the time to make you go enough's enough?
Yeah, well, I've had a few rock bottom moments, actually. The rock bottom moment, and this is what I was alluding to talking to Sam about the third child. My rock bottom moment when I was 33 years old. So this is 2003. I'm 33, and I've just taken a new job, and I take the job. It's like a prestigious job at a consulting firm, famous consulting firm in London. And I realized, like, almost the first day, I'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. I just hated the job. I was like a square peg in a round hole. It was a hothouse environment where everyone was like hyper competitive. Everyone was like putting a lot of pressure on themselves. Everyone's kind of an insecure overachiever, and it was an explicitly up or out culture. In other words, if you don't do really well, and if you don't progress and get promoted, you get managed out pretty quickly. And at the time, my wife had just given up work. She was pregnant with our second child. We'd just moved house, and it just felt like the entire burden of providing for wife, one little baby, and another one on the way, and kind of seeing that stretching out. So I'm not trying to depress you, Sam. Seeing that stretch out like 18 to 21 years into the future, I'm like, that was my like, oh shit moment. And at this, and at the same time, I'm like, I'm in a job I hate, and my industry's in a recession, so I'm kind of screwed.
Yeah, fair enough. I was going to ask you on that. Just before that, when you mentioned about people wouldn't necessarily see you and think you had a weight problem or looked unhealthy, would you say that maybe it was your mental health had burnt out before the rest of your body actually looked that way to someone on the street? Do you see what I'm saying?
That's exactly what you're saying. It's exactly right. So if I lived off adrenaline, I was running around, I was like trying to meet deadlines all the time, and it's a sort of confrontational environment. Like I was working on negotiations where people get very het up. There's a lot at stake, etc. So I'm living off adrenaline, and I'm burning out, and essentially that's what burnout is. Like, if you're burning out, you're creating a lot of adrenaline, and if you know the sort of biology, adrenaline gets created from dopamine. And so if you live off adrenaline for long periods of time, you essentially burn out, and you're dopamine deficient. And that affects your ability to focus, to work hard, to pursue goals. and to kind of stay motivated. And so, yeah, I mean, I didn't know all this at the time. I just knew that I felt like crap.
How did you overcome that?
Well, that was quite a long journey. So in the very short term, I had a big, at the time I was physically able to like exercise hard. So I managed my anxiety and what was almost certainly sort of undiagnosed clinical depression. I managed that through exercise. So again, I talked about like I was cycling a lot, I was running a lot. And I used running and cycling as my sort of as a form of meditation, as a form of stress relief. So I could really just, hurt myself, like just really like run hard, run long, and just burn off all the like anger and frustration that I had. So I had some sort of like health. That was kind of mentally a healthy thing to do, which is like use exercise as a stress relief. So that that was one thing that helped. I had to give up alcohol at the time. Hangovers are intolerable when you've got depression. They're absolutely intolerable. Like the black cloud just descends over you the next day. And so hangovers just go from like an annoyance to just like living in hell. The first thing I had to do was just cope, like get through each day. When things are really, really, really tough, you just got to get through the day. You've just got to get through that day. You go to sleep and then you get through the next day. And you really, that phrase, taking it one day at a time, I really kind of learned and internalized what that meant at that time. You slowly claw your way out of the hole. And then I did a bunch of, I tried to look for another job. It took me a year to find another job. So I basically had the most miserable year of my life, clinging on, think I'm going to get fired every day. In response to that, I focused on what I could control. And one of the things that I could control was my spending. And so, I just turned off the spending tap and went into what I call monk mode, where you just stop, stop spending any money on like pubs, alcohol, restaurants, going to the theater, going to the cinema, all of that just cut out totally. And so I just hunkered down for a while, ran off my frustration, looked for another job, basically survived each day, and eventually like found another job. And then, things started to get better after that. It's a long haul. When you're in a deep, dark hole, it's a long way out.
Did you move industries or did you move to a similar company? What did you do?
I stayed in the same industry, but I did move job, and it was a less brutal job, and it was a better culture fit for me. So I moved job and I regrouped. For me to change career at that point, I couldn't really afford to do that. With the wife not working, and 2 kids, I just couldn't afford to go and be a yoga teacher or something. Something. I had to stay in finance. I was kind of trapped in it. And so, I use the analogy. It's like being in a prison camp, it's a sort of prison camp where you can't see the walls, you can't see the wire fence. Like you're trapped by your lifestyle, by your choices, by your financial situation, into like staying in that industry and staying not in that job. I moved job, but I stayed in that industry, and slowly, like in The Great Escape, I dug my way out financially. So I just like focused on living cheaply and stashing the money and getting to the point where I had money to be able to walk away.
I'm going to ask you a question on that, Barney. So you mentioned obviously when you turn the spending tap off, you stop going out pubs, alcohol, restaurants, stuff like that. Obviously, I see some similarities with me when I was boozing hard and it was like after work in a stressful job. I would be going to kind of like the pub or to restaurants, whatever, as a kind of escape. And my home life was also stressful with young children. Obviously, you mentioned that you was in the midst of your partner not having a job and also the young children at home. Was it then additional stress as you weren't having escapism with those, dealing with that at home alongside what you said was a real stressful year for yourself anyway?
Well, when you have children, it changes you. I mean, actually, as a man, it changes you biochemically. So one of the things I've subsequently found out is that when you have, you hold your, like a newborn baby, they've got this sort of baby smell to them, a very
Yeah.
distinct baby smell to them. They're giving off these like pheromones. And those pheromones essentially knock a third off your testosterone as a man. And that's biologically adaptive, or it would have been in history, because it basically softens you and it makes you a bit sort of softer and more gentler and better at, playing with a sort of fragile little baby. So there's a good sort of evolutionary point to it, but the slightly nasty side effect is it kind of made me a little weaker and a little less resilient, when I'm having to like try and hold down a tough job. So like having children, changes you, it changes your focus. Suddenly you're very aware that you're responsible for these fragile little things. And so in some ways it wasn't that much of a problem to stop going, out drinking and out to restaurants. It's like, okay, fine, this is my new life. I've got new priorities. So for me, it was a bit of a brutal adjustment, but maybe it made me grow up. Maybe it was good for me.
Did you make that decision like, was it clear that needed to happen, or was it like it came clear after a while, and maybe did anyone say anything to you, or any people mention that, maybe you need to look at this differently? How did that come about? Or did you just have like a light bulb moment like that?
I still remember to this day, I'm changing my daughter's nappy, and I'm just like, trying to hold my nose at the same time as I'm changing her nappy. And I just suddenly realized, firstly, someone did this for me. That's like a weird thought. And secondly, like I'm responsible for this creature, and this creature's, for the next 18 years. And it's just like, and I basically said, it's time, I'm going to have to man up. It kind of sucks. I like being a sort of an extended adolescent. I used to be able to just like, chill out in at the weekends or whatever, play video games, but like, looks like I'm on the hook now. So you realize, oh, my whole life has changed. I didn't quite realize I knew it'd change a bit, but I didn't really know what I was signing up for. If you've got good role models in your life, like your dad, your uncles, like good guys that are older than you, and like, you can talk about that, it won't come as such a shock to you. But I didn't really feel like anyone prepared me for that, and maybe that's just my fault. Maybe it's me. I didn't go out and find good mentors, good advice.
How long were you in the rut for? So you're 33. When did you kind of come out of it?
Essentially, within a year, I was no longer depressed, like seriously, clinically depressed, and so I was, back to being able to function and back to, normality. But then I still worked for another 9 years in that industry after that.
And overcoming depression, how does that work? And how do you identify that you're depressed?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know, in the sense that I never went to see a doctor. So like I just had the mentality, well, you don't talk about these things. You don't go and see a doctor. I also had my attitude was just like, run it off, bitch, to myself. And so I also had a concern, a fear that if I went to the doctor, I was pretty sure they would put me on SSRIs or, some antidepressant drug. And I was just worried that I'd get on those and never get off them, because I've got a little bit of an addictive personality, hence my sort of issues with drinking. And I kind of had this fear that if I go to the doctor and get on the happy pills, I may never get off the happy pills. I never got a diagnosis. It was just brutal, and I know this through just listening to other people's experience of depression. For me, it was like when you wake up in the morning, there was just this sort of crushing like sense of despair. And it's like, as I say, it's like a black cloud is blocking out the sun, and you just can't see like, the point of anything. It's really hard to get out of bed. And the way I say it is like, in some ways, depression is the worst of all illnesses, or the worst of all injuries, because I'll make a joke of this. Like, okay, let's say someone cuts your leg off, but you're a sort of happy chappy sort of a guy. That will feel a lot worse than having two functional legs but being depressed. Like, being depressed is the worst. It's when you've got depression, it's just the worst. It's just the worst experience. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's got a lot more focus on it, like these days. But back then, I didn't get any help, didn't talk to anyone, didn't take anything. I just kind of did what instinctively felt like it was helping.
I think this is a fascinating subject, right? Because we're all men, right? And I don't think men find it very good at opening up about weakness, maybe. If you could roll the years back, what would you have done differently? And what would you advise others to kind of do in a similar situation?
Everyone is different. Okay. So everyone's situation is different. The reason that I felt so trapped and unable to leave that job was that I had, from my childhood background, which I sort of alluded to at the start of the show, I had this irrational terror of being poor. I had this irrational terror of being homeless. And so, like when I'm 32 and 33, like I've got a house and I'm not even behind on the mortgage payments, but I'm just terrified because I know that I need this job to, feed the children, pay the mortgage, etc. Everyone's situation is different. Everyone's childhood's different. Everyone's view of the world is different. And essentially, I had to make a bunch of changes financially to make myself feel better. And I had to make a bunch of changes from a lifestyle and health perspective, i.e., cutting out alcohol, and like doing long distance running and cycling. Like if you actually drill into the evidence and the surveys, the medical studies rather, exercise is a more powerful intervention for depression than either talk therapy or like antidepressant drugs. It's kind of wild when you look into it. So I'm not against therapy. I'm not against people in going to talk to their doctor and getting antidepressant medication. Obviously there's a place for all of those things and those elements of the approach, but if you look at the study evidence, it's brutal. Like therapy and drugs ain't as good as exercise in terms of outcomes for depression.
Yeah, I am a bit of a drugophobe. The addictive personality is definitely there. I've picked up every habit that you could probably imagine over the years. With kind of addictions and giving up stuff, I think you have to kind of go cold turkey with things to get out the other ends. I think I'd be in the same mindset as you of trying to fight it, knowing that I can kind of sense check my own body and mind and that sort of stuff than doing it medically. But then again, everyone's different, right? And that's probably not good advice for certain people, right? So I totally resonate where you're coming from.
The problem is, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And to a doctor, everything kind of looks like an opportunity to prescribe drugs. So that's a little unfair to doctors, but there's some truth in that.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about your kind of psychology walking into that new job, because I'm interested in this and the culture being wrong. Was the culture against your kind of maybe morals or kind of beliefs, or was it just same industry for too long where you're kind of a bit long in the tooth for it and that sort of thing? Like,
Well, yeah, there's a bit of truth in that, the latter. So what the consulting firm used to do, it used to hire like kids, essentially, people in their 20s, who were super energetic, super ambitious, super hardworking. And I was like 33, and I was like, had kids, and I was starting to get a bit more like rounded and more perspective. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of like, I'm past this. Like, I'm not right. It's not the right time of my life to be here. So yeah, I mean, I didn't object to what the company was doing. It wasn't doing anything illegal. Far from it. It was, it was, kind of a pillar of the establishment, but it was just the wrong culture for me at that point in my life.
sure. Okay, let's talk present day then. So what's your coaching program? What are your kind of ambitions for it, and what are you trying to solve here, like, for people?
Because I'm a finance guy, like professionally, that was my career in high finance, corporate finance. So and I had this background where I felt compelled to accumulate money in order to make sure that I wouldn't be homeless, right? So that I kind of channeled my irrationality, channeled my childhood trauma in pursuit of saving my money up. So finance was the thing that I knew most about. It was the thing that was where I had sort of deep credentials and deep experience. And so when I first started, when I quit my job, I went to talk to a couple of wealth management firms about, what if I become a sort of financial advisor and wealth manager, and I can just sort of, there's less deadline pressure, and I can talk to clients and sort of help them. And I soon realized, so I talked to St. James Place, for example, and which is now sort of infamous for overcharging people. And I just realized, talking to them, that I just didn't think their business model was sustainable or particularly ethical. It certainly didn't align with what I wanted. So I looked at, career change, career change, job change, but I couldn't find an opportunity that was what I wanted to do. So I just struck out. I focused for a while on my family, spending time with the kids, did the school run. I did some stuff for me. I basically just decompressed. I took my bike to the Alps and cycled some of the big Tour de France summit finishes like Alpe d'Huez and Col de la Croix de Fer and Col de Galibier, that I'd watched on the TV. I'd always they were on my bucket list of things to do. So the first year, if you like, after leaving finance, I didn't really do anything. And I eventually sort of started a blog, and then the blog started to get traction and it got noticed by people, and I got a bit of a following. And one day I just thought, well, what if I put a little link at the top of the page that says coaching, and see if anyone, and I wrote a little sales page saying, I'm Barney, I know about money, I can help you with money, I can help you with investing, I can stop you being ripped off by the city and by financial services firms, and teach you to manage your own portfolio. And much to my surprise, about 2 weeks later, someone clicked on it, sent me an email saying, I'd like to pay you for some coaching. And that was kind of proof of concept for me that there was an unmet need. There was a tiny little gap in the market for giving people financial coaching, and rather than selling them product, rather than selling them insurance policies, rather than selling them like high fee investment products, being like not trying to sell people they don't need, like just trying to help them evaluate like what to do for themselves, help them make their own decisions, talk about pros and cons with them, but essentially teach them to fish for themselves rather than kind of sell them fish. It turned out that there was a gap in the market for that, and so the coaching sort of built up from there. So for quite a few years, I just did, in my coaching, it was just financial only. So it was just talking about different strategies, like what, should I pay off my mortgage? Should I invest some money in the stock market? If I'm going to invest in the stock market, how do I do that? How do I do that without paying a load of fees? Yada, yada, yada. So I was very much focused on the financial side of it for the first several years. But I realized the more I talked to people, that the people that were most focused on sort of super saving and trying to achieve sort of financial freedom, they were often motivated by extreme, fear or dissatisfaction with their existing, like with their life, with their job. They were kind of feeling trapped, like I'd felt trapped. And so in some ways, extreme frugality and extreme saving and an extreme focus on money is like one way to cope, is one way out of a situation you don't like. And it's one way to cope with like, how the hell do I get out of this job? it's not necessarily the best way, not necessarily the fastest way, but it is. But what I was seeing in my clients was a lot of these people don't just have a money problem; they have a career problem and or a health problem.
And
Does
sobriety.
that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Sobriety. So are you still sober now?
So I haven't had a drink for 2.5 years now.
Okay.
So what happened is, I told you when I was like 33, I had to sort of quit alcohol because it was just giving me these crushing hangovers. So I had to cut it out for a couple of months. But, you know, as soon as I'd kind of clawed my way out of the hole, I was like, oh, it's fine. It's not a problem. I'm okay again now. So, you know, I'll go back to my favorite treat. And essentially, you know, over the course of the next, you know, whatever, 10 years or so, more actually, I just got back into drinking and I thought there was no problem with that. So I drank, other than, you know, the month or so when I was 32, 33 and I was really depressed. I drank from age 17 to age 52. So I had, like a 35-year drinking career, and I've just been off it for the last 2.5 years. And, you know, I'm not knocking people that drink, and I'm not a Puritan. I'm all for having fun. I'm like, you know, when no one knows better than me that you can have a lot of fun drinking, right? So I don't need to be told that. I'm like, I get it. Like drinking may not be big and clever, but it's a lot of fun. But it is poison. So alcohol is poison. And so that's, you know, there's nothing wrong with drinking when you're young and healthy and you give yourself time to recover from the poison, but there is a cumulative effect. So alcohol damages you like it's death by 1,000 cuts, and the damage accumulates. And so, I got to 52 and I'm like, oh, I need to stop now.
Yeah, I was going to ask what when you got to that age, was it like that? Was it I'm done? Like, you obviously, was it like, if you don't mind me asking, was it health issues you was having, or was it you just research you did on it, or all of that accumulated where you thought, right, that's me done?
Yeah, so research would not have been enough because, you know, I loved it. It was my favorite treat. It was my favorite escape. So just reading like, oh, it's bad for you, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. I don't give me that. I know all that. You know, I'm a big boy. I'll make my own mistakes. So no, just reading it made no impact on me at all. What really got through to me was I had two big health scares. In the aftermath, after COVID, essentially I had this like weird condition whereby like food wasn't like staying down properly. So like I would eat something and it would then pop back up into my mouth. And so I would like go to the doctor and say, what's going on? And it was silent reflux or non-acid reflux. And I went and had the doctor referred me to the hospital, and I had an endoscopy where they put a tube.
I've had that, yeah.
That is no fun.
It's not fun at all, no.
And it's
you're kind of awake throughout the whole thing, aren't you, as well? It's just probably want to stop doing that action, but yeah.
You've seen I haven't seen the film Deep Throat, but it's how I imagine, like, you know, you feel your gag reflex like kick in, you feel it at the back of your throat. It's horrible. It's
horrible.
Absolute
Yeah, that's really
one of the
bad.
most unpleasant experiences I've ever had. And you know, and then the camera sort of goes down and you're looking at the camera, and what they said is, they said you've got Barrett's esophagus, and you've got 25% chance of that converting to esophageal cancer. And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't sound like much fun. And they said at the time, the main risk, you know, what are the risk factors that boost your chances of getting Barrett's esophagus and then esophageal cancer is alcohol. There were some other things as well, but alcohol was the main one, I think. And so that was a big wake up and smell the coffee moment. The other big now, so that was big, but then something else was even bigger than that. Aftermath of COVID, I completely lost my libido. And it was like I could have there could have just been naked supermodels like lying down in front of me, and I would have been like, do you mind just getting out of the way? Because I'm trying to get to the fridge, or, I'm trying to, go and sit on the sofa over there. So I just lost all interest in sex totally. And for like a man, that's just like terrifying. It's like, what has gone wrong here? And so that was the thing that really like shook me out of my complacency. And that was the thing that basically forced me to, so I just tried to do as much research as I possibly could about like what causes low libido. So, get on the internet. And the first thing, if you go on the internet and you put in male low libido, the first thing you'll get is just a ton of results about low testosterone. And so I got myself a blood hormone panel test, and I tested my testosterone, and I was kind of middle of the range for that. So I had this sort of mystery where like the internet was telling me that testosterone was the thing that determined your libido, and yet my testosterone was in the normal range. That sort of prompted, various trips to the doctor. The doctor couldn't shine any light on it at all. They weren't helpful. So I basically just had to read everything I could about just health, male health, hormonal health in general. And eventually, this is the hilarious thing about the addict's mindset. You look everywhere else other than the obvious cause that's right in front of you. And I spoke to a health coach, and he asked me about my drinking, and I told him about my drinking, and he was like, okay, well, you've heard of Brewer's Droop, haven't you? And I'm like, yeah, I have. And he's like, well, is that ringing any bells? And I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. This is like, it's not just some short-term thing when you're hammered. This is like, I've just lost my libido for a period of weeks and months. And he's like, yeah, but that can happen. So I just suddenly had this sort of light bulb moment that my favorite hobby, my favorite reward, my favorite treat, was kiboshing my health and my sex drive.
I'm in the process of giving up sugar, flour, caffeine, and alcohol. Been completely dry of all of that for 21 days now. My brain's trying to tell me you're only doing it for 90 days, so you'll be fine in 90 days. Go back to it in 90 days. But as I go along, I'm feeling better and better at times. I feel dreadful at times as well, to be honest. It's pretty difficult, this one. But the whole point is to try and get habits in check and stuff. But as we've discussed on this podcast loads of times, Sam's been sober for what, 700, 800 days now, Sam?
Yeah, I think it's about 850 days now. Yeah.
I'm on and off. So I'll take 3 months off, 3 months on, and probably in a very similar mind frame as you when you were at 33. That's what we are now. I've been in the same company for 14 years, same industry for 14 years. And I think I feel a sense of like, what's next is maybe the position I'm in. And ever since I've been giving up all of the flour, sugar, everything, I think my anger weirdly's come out for the last few weeks. Didn't realize that I was that temperamental, and I'm a lot kind of less laid back with things. I'm like, I need to get done now.
Is that with the libido as well, or
maybe not libido, but
okay.
That's not been affected. That's definitely not.
Your one remaining pleasure, mate.
Yeah. No, it's just when
up,
he was saying, I need to get this done and I need to get it done now.
Well, if you're giving up sugar and caffeine and alcohol all at the same time, it's like, man, that's tough.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. But the guy that we've got kind of coaching us through this is basically saying that the real issues will start really presenting themselves now. It's interesting to hear like the perspective from now to when you were at that age and what you were. Because I think, I mean, it's a different industry, but similar type of environment where we hire a lot of younger generations through. And be it that I started there at 19, I always was one of them. Now I'm kind of flipping over to the other side. I'm not quite sure. The culture is kind of on point at times, but I just, everything you're saying makes a lot of sense. How do you help people then in your coaching? What's your kind of method, approach, and that sort of stuff?
What I never do is say, okay, here's a standard template that applies to everyone, because everyone is different. Everyone's situation is different. So context really, really, really matters. Like how old they are they married? Do they have children? Like what job are they in? Like I would always, so I start with the person in front of me. And, what I'm trying to do is how do you unlock the greatest positive change? What will be the thing that helps this person the most? Kind of what is their weakest link? So one of my little catchphrases is you're only as strong as your weakest link. So you remember I talked about that female lawyer who died of alcoholism. Like if you just looked at, I mean, she was an absolute, terror to work with. She was, highly intelligent, like hardworking, highly motivated, yada yada yada. But you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if you're alcohol addicted, that's your weakest link. That is your weakest link. And there's no shadow of a doubt about it. And so when someone comes to me, there's a presenting problem, there's a surface level problem, and there's normally like a deeper underlying issue or root cause for it. And so often, so a coaching process is the process of kind of getting to the bottom of it, getting to the root causes, finding out what is their weakest link, helping them like fix their weakest link, and getting them the most bang for their buck.
I'm going to ask a quick question to Barney.
Okay.
I was just thinking, obviously, you mentioned what happened when you was 32, 33 of the high pressure job and the situation you found yourself in then. Do you, obviously you've stopped boozing now, so I assume that's one of the things, but do you have a preventative plan in place where you do particular things now in order to stop, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but to stop a lapse of maybe falling back to that way?
That's a brilliant question. Like when you get depression, you're then worried about, it's so bad that you're then worried about it for the rest of your life, because you're like, what if I slip back in that hole? You know how dark the hole was, you know how hard it was to claw yourself out of the hole. So for quite a few, like after an earthquake, there's after tremors. Well, after depression, you get sort of, oh my God, I'm going back into it, sort of little scares. That fear kind of stays with you. I've completely lost that now. I'm not worried. I will never go back to that. I will never go back to that. And I know that I never need to go back to that, because essentially what I like to say is biochemistry is upstream of everything. So if you get your biochemistry right, it's almost impossible to be depressed. Now, obviously, if you get bad news, if you have a child that dies or your wife dies or whatever, you're going to be depressed, and that's healthy, normal, adaptive, right? But that's grief. Depression is something different. Okay, so I know that I can never be depressed now if I stick to my plan. And what does my plan look like? Well, I've got a physical diary. You've got a paper diary, and every day, like I write down the number of days that I'm alcohol free. So I keep a log of that, and for me, I know that if I stay off alcohol, I'm going to be fine, because everything else I'll be able to figure out. For other people, they might have a different issue, a different problem, but the principle still applies. I call it keeping a health diary, where you kind of log your inputs and your outputs. So what are your inputs? Your inputs are literally the things that you put into your body. So do you put alcohol into your body or not? Do you put sugar into your body or not? Do you put processed junk food into your body or not? Do you put like seed oils into your body or not? Those are inputs. The other inputs are, do you get good sleep? Do you get outdoors enough? Do you get exercise? Do you get time with people that you like being around, like friends and family? Those are all inputs. Those are all health inputs. And then your outputs are, how do you feel? It's like your mood, your energy level, and libido, those are all outputs. And so by keeping a health diary for long enough, and I've been keeping one for like 3 years now, you log your inputs, you log the outputs, and you can draw dotted lines between the two. And you're like, oh, I feel like crap today. I drank alcohol yesterday. Why am I surprised? It's not a surprise. It's a hangover. I don't have depression. I've just got a hangover. So my process is keeping a health diary, recording your inputs, recording your outputs, and that brings what gets measured gets managed. So that brings conscious awareness to the inputs, and you can see what really moves the needle in terms of your mood. So in the past, when I was like young and I was an idiot, I'd be like, oh, I feel terrible today. The world is ending. It's a terrible, it must be due to what's happening in the news or whatever. And then I would realize, oh, the sun would come out and I'm like, I'm great now. And I'm like, well, maybe it wasn't the world that was the problem. Maybe it wasn't what was happening in the news. Maybe it was just like, the sun went behind a cloud.
Okay, sure. And you mentioned your health diary. So do you do like journaling or anything like that as well? Do you write down, I don't know, at the end of the day, write down, like, I don't know, stuff you're grateful for, or do you write down what's happened on that day alongside obviously inputting all those different things? I'm sure there'll be crossover, because I know you mentioned some of the things for the inputs is like spending time with the people and stuff like that. Do you write down when them things happen?
I don't use it as a gratitude journal, but gratitude is a powerful tool. So gratitude is a powerful tool. When you feel gratitude, it kind of pushes everything else out of your brain temporarily. So it's impossible to feel grateful for the fact that I'm healthy and I can walk and I can run, and at the same time like whiny and be a sort of be a whiny little git. So gratitude is a powerful tool, and I don't use my diary for that, but I figured out what would give me perspective. So I just remember like when I was like, when I was at one of my lowest ever, I remember getting off the train at Waterloo, and I'm just so sorry for myself that I'm having to trog into the office again and do something that I hated. And then I just remember seeing this guy picking his way through the crowd in Waterloo with a white stick, and I'm like, how is that even possible? Like, it's just such a chaotic, like, complex environment to navigate, and that guy's doing it, and he's blind, and here's me being a whiny little bitch, because I'm gonna go to a meeting and that I don't want to go to. So I don't know if that's gratitude, but it's certainly perspective.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's fascinating, and I think a lot of people, with the kind of experts we've had on, they're very kind of focused on a very singular area, and looking at more broadly across kind of finances to health to relationship with your employer to relationships personally, I think is a very interesting route, actually, and I'm interested to hear more. So we've got to wrap up, but how do people get in touch with you?
So I have a website, which is The Escape Artist. So it's www.theescapeartist.me. So it's not .com, not .co.uk, but The Escape Artist, all one word, .me. And you can go there. You can sign up for my Substack. I do a sort of free weekly email newsletter. You can find me on Twitter, The Escape Artist, and people can email me, barney.whiter@gmail.com. So yeah, I'm, if you Google me, you'll find me, because everyone's famous for 15 minutes. I was famous for sort of 5 minutes in 2018, 2019, when I appeared in all the newspapers, because at the time, people were very interested in financial freedom. So if you Google me, you'll find me.
Listeners, please get in touch with Barney if this pod has resonated with you. And we will be back for more 0% podcast episodes now that Sam's, for the time being, stopped producing children. But Barney, thank you very much for coming on. I think that's a really interesting episode. And yeah, we look forward to staying in touch for sure.
Yeah,
It's my
thank you for your
pleasure.
time, Barney.
Yeah, great to meet you guys.
We've got some diet plans, health scans, sugar bans, fitness fans, PTs, injuries, laying off the Chinese, ball games, gym chains, protein gains and skin tight tops, and we ain't gonna stop until we hit the 50k. Drop, 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 drop. No excess fat, no FAT, no curry bag, no guarantee. Rough or buff, lean on me. We'll end up as fit as a pig.